What's up guys, I'm Colin with D-Pad Dubs bringing you a new guide on one of my favorite tanks, Sigma. I started this channel with two other guys after we realized that simply playing Overwatch just wasn't enough, so we started this channel. We have been playing Overwatch since release, and we want to share our knowledge with all of you to get the most from this incredible game and frankly help you win as much as possible. Sigma has been hit pretty hard with the nerf hammer since his release, but he is still one of the best tanks when played correctly. His kit is incredibly versatile and he has vast potential to carry. His skill ceiling is very high, so I've included some beneficial tips that will push your Sigma play to the next level, so let's get started. First, when to play Sigma. Sigma can be extremely valuable in the right hands, but he has some pretty hard counters that can make him much more difficult to play. Pretty much any character that has a beam can be very difficult for Sigma. This includes Zarya, Symmetra, and Echo. Sigma can still be a viable pick against these heroes, but requires a slightly more creative playstyle. The most important thing when playing against these heroes is understanding that they are a high threat to you, because they can shoot past your kinetic grasp and have excellent shield break. A good chunk of the player base also sees Doomfist as a common counter to Sigma, and although he can be tough when played well, he honestly doesn't pose as much of a threat as most people think. Sigma has two powerful CC abilities that can shut Doomfist down, and his high damage can make short work of Doomfist. I won't go on too much of a tangent here, but if you are struggling against a Doomfist, try using your Accretion Rock as he is charging his rocket punch or even during the punch animation. Do not use Accretion if he has uppercut off cooldown. This will make Doomfist much harder to hit as he can easily get out of its way. Now let's consider who pairs with Sigma best. There are two categories that determine which characters you'll work well with: general playstyle and ult synergy. The introduction of Sigma brought on the double barrier meta that works with both Orisa and Reinhardt. Since all of these tanks are frontline defenders, their playstyle naturally synergizes and makes for an excellent tank combo. Orisa Sigma is an obvious choice because of the Halt Accretion combo and the double barriers, but Orisa is relatively weak right now, so I think there are much better options. I've actually had a lot of success pairing with a Winston.
Did someone say peanut butter?
This may be a more unconventional combo, but it has a ton of value. Sigma has enough range that he can usually aid Winston in whatever fight he's in, and Winston has the mobility to peel where Sigma can't and better protect the backline from flankers like Genji and Tracer. Frankly, Sigma is so versatile that he can pair with any tank and be successful. He is an especially good pick in Diamond and below because playing him can give your other tank the freedom to choose whatever character they are most comfortable with, and you can make the comp work. There are also a few ults that take advantage of Sigma's Flux and makes for some very fun play. If the other tank is playing Hammond, he can place his proximity mines directly underneath the characters you pick up and easily finish them off. If the enemy team is stuck in your Zarya's Grav, they won't be lifted in the air by your Flux, but they will still take the half max health damage when the animation finishes. Likewise, Mei's Blizzard can be used either before or after Flux for a great combo. There are plenty of ways to pair with Sigma's ult, so consider your team composition and communicate with your team on how you can synergize your ult with them. 2. Shield management. Most people would compare Sigma's kinetic grasp to D.Va's defense matrix, but I actually use his shield more like defense matrix than his grasp. Because of the range of his shield and the ability to quickly deploy and redeploy it, it can be used to block essential abilities without the shield taking unnecessary damage. It's important to have knowledge of what your kinetic grasp can and can't block in order to know when to use your shield instead to make sure that your grasp doesn't get cancelled. There are a bunch of videos that showcase what kinetic grasp can and can't block, and if you don't already know those interactions, then I recommend getting familiar with those in order to know when to use that ability. Just look up Sigma kinetic grasp on YouTube. For instance, if the enemy is running a Roadhog, pay attention to when his hook is available. He can pull you through your kinetic grasp, but it will be blocked by your shield. No decent Roadhog is going to willingly throw his hook at your shield, but if you bait him by keeping your shield down, you can usually force it out of him. Expect his hook and deploy your shield right before or even as he uses his hook in order to block it. This also works against Sigma's Accretion Rock and Brigida's Whip Shot. I absolutely love playing against an opposing Sigma because it turns into a battle of wits and who can better manage their cooldowns. Here are a couple specific tips that ensure you will always win a duel over an opposing Sigma. I set up a quick duel in a custom game to demonstrate how to manage your cooldowns in this scenario. Always have your shield ready to block his accretion and never use your grasp until after he's used his accretion. Only use accretion when he uses kinetic grasp. Lastly, get past his shield. Most Sigmas don't play aggressive, and if you deploy your shield past his as you advance, you're giving yourself cover and forcing him to withdraw and then redeploy his shield. Now let's get back on track with shield management. Blocking abilities with your shield doesn't only go for protecting yourself against dangerous cooldowns. Your job as a tank is to protect your entire team from these and to mitigate as much damage as possible. That may sound obvious, but the biggest shortcoming of so many tank players is they focus primarily on protecting themselves and don't have the awareness to mitigate damage for the rest of their team. Your shield is one of your most valuable resources, so try to avoid it taking unnecessary damage, especially during the poke battle. Use Grasp to eat as much damage as possible and gain a bunch of extra shields added to your health bar. This extra shield is surprisingly easy to build, so you can even be a meat shield until your adaptive shields are depleted. Getting into the rotation of using your barrier, absorbing damage with Grasp, and body blocking with your added shields can make Sigma borderline unkillable. One issue that I see for a lot of Sigma players is using their Grasp too late. Kinetic Grasp can block most weapons and abilities in Overwatch, but not all, including melees. If Grasp is used when your health is too low, the enemy is likely to find a way to kill you anyways. It's best to use it when you have attention from the enemy team, but not too late that you'll die before it ends. Lastly, Sigma's shield can easily be used to cut off enemy healing from the backline. Shields block damage and healing, so blocking off an Ana or Baptiste can cripple enemy tanks. Taking down Reinhardt can be extremely difficult with a decent Ana behind him, so give yourself an advantage by cutting off his supply. 3. Positioning. Sigma is a main tank that wants to be on the front line, but does not want to play in the same space as Reinhardt. His primary fire has decent range, and his orbs are much more effective at max range. They can be hard to land directly, but being at that farther range allows you to net plenty of splash damage and charge your ult much more quickly. Most of the time, you'll be in front of your team, but there are times that Sigma is able to flank. The biggest trade-off with flanking as a tank is leaving your team more open to take damage and get picked off, so flanking is dependent on who you're pairing with. If pairing with another main tank like a Reinhardt or a Risa, then flanking can be a good option, but if you're with a Roadhog or Zarya or other off-tank, then you might be leaving your team too open. In the case you're paired with another main tank, you can make small flanks to put more pressure on the enemy backline and get behind enemy shield to do more damage and finish off low health targets. If the mid-fight is going well and the enemy is running out of resources or one of them goes down, start to get more aggressive and put more pressure on the team. If they see you moving towards them, they'll likely start backing up and give you more space. Also, because Sigma's primary fire bounces off walls, you can keep yourself safe whether pushing or retreating by bouncing your shots off walls and still hitting the enemy. I've finished off countless targets by continuing to fire after an enemy has gotten behind a corner. Likewise, if you're holding a choke waiting for the enemy to push, continuously fire your orbs around a corner to put pressure on the enemy team before they can even see you. 4. The perfect Flux. Gravitic Flux can be extremely powerful, but it can easily leave you in a vulnerable position or get negated entirely if not used properly. There are a few ways to keep yourself safe while using your ult and get maximum value. First, be aware of what threats there are to you when you rise in the air to place your Flux. If you are low on health and the enemy is running a McCree or something similar that can easily take you out of the sky, use cover or preemptively put your shield in the air in order to stay safe while you float. I like to be right around a corner when I use Gravitic Flux, so I minimize the amount of time that I'm actually exposed when using my ult. Now once you're sure you can use your ult without being interrupted, choose who to target in order to get maximum value. There might be a large clump of targets that seem like an obvious choice, but let's say there's a Moira, Zarya, and Baptiste all in that clump. All 3 of those characters have an easy way to avoid your ult, and it might be too difficult to make sure that all of their abilities are on cooldown in order to get value. It might be more useful to pick up a lone target that is much more vulnerable and secure an easy pick. Don't be afraid to use your ult on only 1 or 2 targets if those targets have no counter to it. Otherwise, if you have the game sense to track enemy abilities, make sure to use Flux when those counter abilities are on cooldown. 5. Rock the competition. Accretion Rock is a powerful ability with decent damage and a consistent stun. Its hitbox is pretty large, so it's pretty easy to land when used correctly. The most helpful thing to make sure you land as many rocks as possible is to predict where the enemy will be or use it after the enemy has already used their mobility cooldowns. For instance, if a Moira has just faded and she is in your line of sight, she is an easy target. Primarily, however, I use Accretion Rock on tanks that are vulnerable. This small window of CC can often be enough to finish them off and put tons of pressure on the enemy front line. As soon as a Reinhardt shield breaks or Zarya exhausts her personal shield, hit them with a rock and delete them. When doing flanks like I mentioned earlier, you can lead with Accretion in order to easily land your follow-up shots. You don't necessarily need to get a pick here, but putting this kind of pressure on the enemy team will drain a ton of resources. It can also be used to interrupt powerful abilities and ultimates. Hitting a Moira using Coalescence is not only incredibly satisfying, but very impactful. As with all abilities in Overwatch, Accretion Rock should be used with purpose. Consider how it will affect the enemy team when you use it outside of just being a bit of a nuisance. I can't recommend watching your own replays enough. Watch one of your replays and pay attention to how and when you use all of your abilities. Is there a teammate that died that you could have protected? Was there a vulnerable target you could have finished or an ultimate you could have stopped? If you'd rather have someone else review your gameplay, feel free to request a VOD in the comments and receive feedback from all 3 members of our channel. Well, that's all I've got for you today. We're a small channel and trying to grow, so please like and subscribe and check out some of our other guys as well. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, thanks for hanging out in the D-pad.